The toughest offshore sailing race in the Southern Hemisphere has been going since 1945. But for almost a decade, it has been dominated by just one boat.
They got the money, they got the design, they got the boys, they got the whole package, which is why they're so hard to beat.
But in 2015, that looked set to change.
Those guys happen to be kind of the big dogs down here, so we're going to have to get by them to pull it off, let the chips fall.
This month on Mainsail, we're in Sydney, Australia for the Rolex Sydney-Hobart race, and it's shaping up to be the closest edition ever.
There are few places on the planet that offer finer sailing conditions than the glorious Sydney Harbour, the largest natural harbour in the world. On one side, the magnificent city of Sydney, its iconic Harbour Bridge and Opera House, two of the most recognisable structures of the 20th century, opening out into the stunning harbour itself. The entrance to the harbour lies just 10 miles north of Botany Bay, the site that in 1770 saw James Cook first set foot on Australian soil. 18 years later, in a dispatch back to England, Governor Arthur Phillip gleefully remarked, "We had the satisfaction of finding the finest harbour in the world, in which 1,000 ships may ride in the most perfect security."
Almost 230 years ago, the British were delighted with their discovery. The reason perhaps not just because of the calm and tranquility of this stunning natural harbour, but more so because of the seas it was protecting them from.
To leave the safety of the harbour for a sailor is quite the undertaking. There's nothing due south for over 2,000 miles, and due east it is 1,000 miles to the northern tip of New Zealand.
It may look pretty calm from here, but out there beyond the heads is the infamous Tasman Sea. It's the northern boundary of the ferocious Southern Ocean, but it's also the racetrack of the Southern Hemisphere's most famous of offshore races.
For 70 years, the Sydney-Hobart race has seen boats leaving the safety of the harbour and heading out into the Tasman Sea on a 600-mile marathon to the safety of Hobart, Tasmania. It's one of the real sailing classics, legendary within the offshore world, and one of the toughest sailing challenges there is.
Here in Australia, it's called the Great Race, and it's the Great Race for a reason. It's like no other race in the world.
It really attaches and grabs the psyche of the Australian public. The welcome in Hobart is better than anything you'll see in anywhere else in the world.
If you're an offshore yachtsman in this country, this is the race you want to win, this is the one you want to turn up for, and that's why so many of us keep turning up year after year.
The race annually attracts some of the biggest names in the sport, along with the largest, fastest offshore racing machines on the planet. In Australia, the race is huge, and the Boxing Day start makes it even more special. The race starts in the glorious summer sailing conditions of Sydney Harbour. Passing out through the famous harbour heads, the fleet then turns south out into the Tasman Sea, where conditions can very quickly change. In front of them, hundreds of miles of open ocean as they charge south, passing the southernmost tip of mainland Australia, into the infamous Bass Straits to Tasmania, and then the climax, 11 miles up the Derwent River to the finish in Hobart. And it's a race with a dramatic past. We've seen previously on Mainsail how in 1998 the Sydney-Hobart fleet left the sanctuary of the harbour and took off into a developing Southern Ocean storm. The results were catastrophic. The fleet torn apart. 5 boats sunk, and tragically 6 sailors lost their lives.
This is not for the faint of heart, this race. It never has been, it never will be. And we're going to have to be up to it just to get the boat there in one piece.
It's one of the most notorious, dangerous stretches of water in the world, Bass Strait. It's only 150 miles wide, but it can be one of the most dangerous stretches of water on the planet.
It's a little bit like being in a washing machine at times. It can be very, very rough indeed. It is a nasty, nasty stretch of water.
It's one of the toughest challenges in our sport then, but it's very much a race. Join us after the break to take a look at why the 2015 Sydney-Hobart is shaping up to be the closest edition ever. This month on Mainsail, we're in Sydney, Australia, at one of the sport's most gruelling of offshore challenges, the famous Rolex Sydney to Hobart race. It's a 630 nautical mile dash across some of the most challenging stretches of water in the southern hemisphere.
Here in Australia, this event is by far the biggest in the sailing calendar, and the star attraction is the 8 times winner and the current record holder, Wild Oats 11.
In the 2012 edition, Wild Oats beat our existing record to set a new time of just 1 day, 18 hours and 23 minutes. A phenomenal achievement, but no real surprise, because this boat has also been first across the line in Hobart, a remarkable 8 times.
Wild Oats 11 is the essential fabric, I think, of the Rolex Sydney-Hobart since the turn of the century. To win this race across the line 8 times, the toughest ocean race in the world, is just amazing. So to see that boat leading the others out of Sydney Harbour in that race to Hobart on Boxing Day is just amazing. It does almost stop the nation.
Although Wild Oats won last year, the 2014 edition saw a brave new challenger take on the race for the first time. Last year's Sydney-Hobart was the first outing for Super Maxi Comanche. With a year of successful racing now under her belt, she's back.
In fact, Comanche poses such a threat this year that the Wild Oats of 2015 has a very different look about her. She spent much of this year going under the knife.
We had a great race last year. Obviously Comanche came out and showed a lot of new tricks that were available in today's world, I guess. To stay in touch with these guys, we had to do something. Building a new boat was just out of the question. It's just, it's just way too expensive in today's world. So the idea of chopping 7 feet off the back and 30 off the front and putting a new 37-foot bow section on, that's what happened. Here she is today in her new form, and I've got to say we're very excited about the way she's performing, and I think she's going to be, it's certainly brought her back up to the current level she needed to be.
Talk to the local sailing press here in Sydney and they'll tell you Wild Oats is still the firm favourite. But our biggest rival, Comanche, is built with one thing in mind. She's wider. She's a more recent build with a big budget. She runs a who's who crew list. The 100-foot Super Maxi Comanche has had quite the year. Since crossing the line second to Wild Oats 11 last year, she set a new 24-hour monohull sailing record and was the first monohull to finish the prestigious Rolex Fastnet race. And all the talk here in Sydney is of the showdown between these two sailing monsters.
Wild Oats is the big dog here. All the accolades, is very deserving. They've done an incredible job with that boat, with that program over the years. They have nothing to prove. We have something to prove. So I guess really the pressure's on us. We gotta step it up.
And in their bid to win, the team at Comanche are pulling no punches. 2 times America's Cup winner, current America's Cup holder, and Oracle Team USA skipper Jimmy Spittle has joined the afterguard. Comanche's 20-strong crew list for the 2015 Sydney-Hobart has racked up over 1 million offshore miles between them. But there's one name in reserve that's desperate to get the call. Australian Christy Hines-Clark is co-owner of the boat with her husband, Netscape billionaire Jim Clark. And if the weather allows, she could be one of the crew.
I've never actually done it aboard before, so I imagine it's pretty exciting. I even grew up watching Wild Oats and barracking for it, so it's a pretty big thing to take it on, but I think it's also good for the race that they've got competition now. There is one objective, and hopefully we'll get the weather to be able to do it this year. We didn't come down here to come second again.
While the big battle is expected to be between the 2 Super Maxis, there's 108 boats taking on this year's Sydney-Hobart. And although there's a host of entries from abroad hoping to attempt an upset, my outside favourite would be with another local sailing icon. There's one man in this fleet of accomplished sailing royalty that can claim above all to be the authority on the Sydney-Hobart race, Australian Sid Fisher. Incredibly, this is his 47th race. Twice he has crossed the line in first place, and at 88 he'll be taking on the fleet in his Super Maxi Ragamuffin.
I think you just do your best and hope the gods give you a break. I think some of my family are very, very keen, and the others just think I'm a nutcase. I'll stop when I can't do it.
Sid's a very colourful bloke, and I think, to use a cliche, he's as hard as nails. He's an icon of the sport. Especially in this country, I don't think you could have a Hobart race without Sid Fisher.
What does it take to win this?
If I knew that, I've been trying for 22 years. I don't know the answer to that.
This year's Rolex Sydney to Hobart race is shaping up to be the closest fought ever. We'll be back in part 3 with the whole race story. But before then, we're going to take a quick look at what else has been going on in the world of sailing this month.
Last month's Mainsail took an in-depth look at the Jules Verne trophy. And in November, Edex Sport and Spindrift began their attempt on the fastest lap of the planet. Their challenge started well, and for over a month, the 45-day record appeared within their grasp. But in the final stages, their luck with the weather ran out, and Bank Populaire's 2010 record remains unchallenged for now. The America's Cup World Series goes from strength to strength, and 3 brand new venues have been added to the lineup for 2016. With the opener in Oman in February, the series then moves to a much anticipated event in Manhattan in New York. Toulon in southern France is the 3rd new venue. Mainsail will be following all the action in the build-up to the America's Cup in Bermuda in 2017. This month on Mainsail, we're in Sydney, looking at one of sailing's most challenging of offshore races, the famous Rolex Sydney to Hobart race. Every Boxing Day for the past 70 years, the cream of offshore sailing have gathered here for this Blue Water Classic, one of the days on the sailing calendar. And this year's edition is shaping up to be one of the closest ever. Skipper of last year's runner-up, Ken Reid, is in a confident mood on race day.
The Aussies love a bet, don't they? And they've still got Wild Oats as favourite.
Really? I don't know. If I were a betting man, for all you back home, if I were a betting man, I'm not sure I'd be betting against the Comanche right now, but we'll see.
I know Christy's been keen to come. What's the final verdict? Is she on or off?
Christy's on. At least she's over at the boat right now. She's nervous, for sure, as you would be. She's been offshore, but this is her first ocean race. Christy's going to be fine.
This is quite a farewell reception, isn't it? You're going.
I am. I'm going. I'm going to Hobart.
You don't sound that convinced.
No. I'm very excited. I've had an amazing prep for this with the boys, and we've been out training all the time. I feel fully prepared, and I'm just going to enjoy it, hopefully.
And the rivalry between the 2 main contenders is high.
Your main competitor just behind you. I mean, it's shaping up to be a great duo.
Oh, it certainly is, you know, and you got Comanche and Rambler there behind us. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better lead-up, really, and a lot of banter going on already, so it's exciting. Tonight's a really important night, you know, big southerly buster tonight, so we just got to make sure we get through that in one piece, and the guys are all pumped, so we just can't wait to get out there.
I had been promised a race start like no other, and out on the water, I wasn't disappointed.
There is an incredible atmosphere. The sky is full of helicopters. This narrow harbour is lined with spectators. It's awash with sailing boats. There's great tension.
Let's go, guys. Let's go.
Wrap it up. He's main event.
Who's the gear? Who's the gear? Who's it?
And the fleet is away in the 71st Rolex Sydney-Hobart. The great race south begins, and it is on in Sydney-Hobart.
Trim on, go now.
Not too tight on the main, boys. We're okay going down the beach like ley line, right? We're all right?
What an amazing start. And the big boats, well, they're now at top speed on their way to Tasmania. We now head to Hobart to see who will win that battle. If you want to find out more about Christy Clark and how she gets on in her first ever offshore race, have a look at the sailing page at CNN Online.
Local boat Perpetual Loyal claimed the honour of being first out of the heads. But once out in the open seas, Comanche really began to stretch her legs. Despite much of the pre-race talk concentrating on the big battle between the two giants, Wild Oats 11 and Comanche, it was George David's Rambler that led the fleet into the first night. But as is often the case with the first night of this race, darkness brought with it a sting in the tail. 40-knot winds, big squalls and monstrous seas had hit the fleet with dramatic consequences. By the morning, a quarter of the boats had retired. Comanche suffered major steering and daggerboard damage. Initial thoughts on the 100-foot Super Maxi, the only option, to withdraw from racing. And Comanche weren't the only casualty. Come daybreak, race favourite, 8 times winner and local hero Wild Oats 11 was limping back to dock. All hopes of a 2015 race win torn to shreds.
Bad luck, mate. I feel really sorry for you all, but it was a great battle. You're doing well.
We got caught in a really bad rain squall. We had like 40 knots of breeze, really heavy rain. It was pitch black. It was just a really difficult situation, and just had a couple of little things went wrong on board, and just snowboard into the mainsail just shredding itself. The game's over, you know. So it's just, you know, we live to fight another day. Simple as that.
Back on the racetrack, the team on board Comanche had worked hard through the night, making enough repairs to keep their hopes alive.
We're clearly wounded, but the team has battled back with dramatic fashion.
A bruised Comanche then, but a racing Comanche nonetheless. Sailing cautiously towards the end goal and yet still holding her own at the front of the fleet. Chasing hard but also sustaining damage, Rambler was the closest threat. And then behind her, and equally hurting, the Australian diehards Ragamuffin. Skipper David Witt desperate for his first ever win on this his 22nd Sydney-Hobart. One day in and they'd been drama aplenty. But this race wasn't done yet. To see the end of this remarkable race, we'd taken the 90-minute flight down to the island of Tasmania.
I'm beginning to realise why people do this boat race over and over again. Win or lose, you end up here. And take a look, it's absolutely breathtaking.
To the northeast of the stunning Derwent River, and after 30 hours of on-the-edge sailing, the crew on board Comanche had pulled off the impossible. They were heading into Hobart, some 12 hours ahead of their closest rivals.
It's a really stunning evening here in Hobart. We're heading out of the Derwent River. We're looking for that lead boat, and they've got a few miles to sail to the finish line right off the city centre. And hopefully the breeze will hold up.
The welcome fleet here in Hobart was something to behold. And for the crew themselves, they cap a stunning season since their second place here 12 months ago, winning line honours in both the Rolex Fastnet race and the Rolex Sydney-Hobart in just 1 year. In offshore sailing terms, that's quite the achievement. For skipper Kenny Reid, it's the ultimate prize.
Kenny, you look like a man who needs to take a big deep breath out.
A deep breath out, maybe a nap. Beer doesn't taste so bad, I can tell you that. What an experience, what a phenomenal experience. I don't know how many tens of thousands of people here on the wall cheering, and just great, speechless. You saw what the steering system looked like back there right now. Can't believe we got here, never mind winning the thing. So very proud, emotional and proud.
Christy Hines-Clark was now the first female owner to take line honours. The race, a far cry from her former life as one of Australia's most loved models.
Now I see what it's all about. I've got a whole new respect for sailors. It was such an amazing experience. I've had an absolute ball. I mean, I've been through quite a few emotions over the last 48 hours, but none better than sailing into here tonight.
This is a race like no other, and it has a draw that brings back some of the world's most legendary sailors year after year. Next in after Comanche was Ragamuffin, after a closely fought match race with Rambler up the Derwent River. A sensational result for 88-year-old Sid Fisher on his 47th race. But skipper David Witt was still not happy.
First Aussie boat in.
Still can't win the race though, can I? How frustrating's that? Especially when we heard the first night we heard Comanche had retired. Oates retired and then Comanche retired and then they rescinded it, so...
The local favourites Wild Oats 11 may not have wowed the crowds of Hobart this year, but in Ragamuffin, the first Australian boat over the line, the crowds had their new heroes. And they had a chance to cheer again when the Australian 52-foot boat Balance took the overall win on handicap. This race has been an immovable part of the Australian sporting calendar for 71 years. And 8 times winner Wild Oats 11 are not giving up their dominance of this prestigious event without a fight.
All very disappointed, obviously, but we'll be back next year to have another go, and just got to wait 364 days until that happens. That's all.
Ken Reid may be one of the world's most experienced offshore sailors, having 3 round-the-world races under his belt. But this 630-mile sprint has pushed him to the limit.
The legs in the Volvo race are 21 days, but this was the most action-packed 2 days of any sailing I've ever done in my life. The people that do this every single year, I don't know how they do it. I think they're better men than I am, better women than I am. I'm not sure I'd want to do it every year, that's for sure. This is one seriously tough race.